Welcome, everybody, to the Pack-A-Day podcast. I'm Rachel Hopmayer, hosting alongside Andy Herman, and it's another Packers victory week. Time to break down. There's tons of film to process, a lot of momentum happening with this team. First and foremost, let's look at the transactions. Today is Tuesday, September 28th, and what happened today? Packers got tight end Tyler Davis from the Colts practice squad. Andy, what do you know about him?
Wait. First and foremost, we are not talking about Tyler Davis. First and foremost, you were at the Ryder Cup. So before we get into any Tyler Davis takes, tell me about the Ryder Cup and what it was like covering it.
I love an opportunity to flex. I just didn't know we were going to get there so soon.
We're going to right away.
Ryder Cup was amazing. I think it's been an awesome moment for the Wisconsin golf scene that I'm sure many of you have seen grow, especially over the past decade, really kind of explosion bloom onto the scene. It was just incredible to be watching 45,000 people scream USA. You know, this is the Olympics for golf, except there is golf Olympics, and this is just something else. Such a special tradition to see everybody come together, to see the economic impact that this had on the Sheboygan area, but also all the way from Milwaukee to Green Bay, just a life-changing experience. I have a new appreciation of the sport. I'm more of a tennis person myself, but this really does make me want to pick up some clubs and actually improve my swings beyond a top golf simulator. Just seeing this camaraderie, the gamesmanship was a life-changing experience for sure.
Yeah, my extent of golf skill is, I think I played like Tiger Woods, like 20, I don't even know, way back in the day. Yeah. That's about the gist of my golf skills, but obviously amazing. I know obviously Michael Jordan was there, Steph Curry was there. There was a ton of celebrities. Did you get an opportunity to talk to any celebs, to see any celebs? Like, who was there when you were there?
I did ran into MJ plenty of times, which was kind of shocking, but he was also in the player posse. So that's what you get there. Steph Curry, saw the pictures, could not find that man in the crowd. I ran into Mike Budenholzer, gave him $1.06. I got a beer raise in response. So he's a man of the people.
Nice.
Otherwise, I was actually walking around with Peter Bukowski for a period of time, and that New York mindset, he's very good at picking out a random white man in the crowd. I'm not used to doing that as much, especially when a lot of people look alike at this type of event. So it was definitely interesting, but that was the extent of who I saw. But I think Budenholzer was the best local celebrity you were going to get, considering the Packers were on the road. I think if this was structured differently, maybe we would have seen some players Friday or Saturday even.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Taller than you would expect, Peter Bukowski, by the way.
Yeah, big time. The length on that man.
It is crazy. Now, the other thing before we jump into Tyler Davis, which I know everyone's on bated breath for, you obviously, and maybe you didn't watch it. I know you were excited for The Bachelor. Do we have a Bachelor recap? It was a big show, right?
Because I'm loyal to the Pack-A-Day listeners and viewers, have actually abstained from the first 3-hour episode of the season just to analyze film to break this down with you, Andy. So I don't want to hear any spoilers. I'm hoping by the time this is posted, I'll get to watch it, but that's 3 hours of content to go through. Luckily, Game Pass had me hooked up with the 40-minute condensed version. There is no condensed version of Bachelor in Paradise. This drama is too manufactured and too juicy for that.
You couldn't fit it into 45 minutes. All of our, viewers just turned off because they were all excited for the 3-hour Bachelor breakdown, but it'll have to do another day. But let's jump into Tyler Davis, because I know everyone's been waiting. You can't find like film on Tyler Davis. Like, it's just, he was Georgia Tech, transferred from UConn, athletic tight end, was a former quarterback. He played a cup of coffee in preseason this year, played a little bit, like 40 some snaps for the Jaguars last year during the regular season, but just not much out there. But yeah, interesting signing for Green Bay. It's not like tight end is something that they're in desperate need of in any way, shape, or form. Dominique Daphne is on IR. They just let Jay Sternberger go. So sort of some fun logistics to at least think about in that regards, but it'll be interesting to see how they use them. This is not a practice squad addition. This is somebody they added to their active roster who has had very minimal snaps. And even in college, like the end of his college, when he transferred to Georgia Tech, played very sparingly. So it'll be interesting to see how they use him. I would guess that he's probably going to start off being inactive and then maybe work his way up into a rotational tight end, if there's an injury or something like that. But we'll see. And if he is active, I would expect a special teams role. I think the more Interesting note, I guess, from Tuesday was the fact that Tyler Lancaster tested positive for COVID. First and foremost, hopefully he's doing okay. But that puts him on the COVID-19 injury list, which opens up that roster spot. And of course, Lancaster just came off what I thought was probably his best game as a pro. So not ideal timing in that regards.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I think, the COVID-19 situation is a reality of this season of playing sports through the pandemic. The pandemic isn't over. This stuff happens no matter how cautious players are. At the end of the day, not everybody surrounding them is vaccinated at any point in the NFL. We see NBA drama happening with vaccinations right now. So you just know that exposures do happen. Again, it is interesting to see, right, Tyler Davis immediately go to the full squad. I also envision a sort of special teams route there, given that they've lost that experience with Sternberger in the room. I think they're looking to slim that down a little bit and see how that goes. But we saw Jaguar targeted this weekend. Exciting to see him continue that rebound from injury. So Sunday was a riveting game, especially late in the fourth quarter. I don't know that the Packers have always been this type of fourth quarter team, but it's certainly nice to see fans' hearts pumping once again. Let's start on the defensive side of the ball, because it really seems like Joe Barry's vision is at least panning out more than it originally was. I have to start with Devondre Campbell. I am so high on him. I love that he's getting to use his speed in a more productive way. He's sideline to sideline. He had 12 tackles, 6 solo. What did you think of his on-field performance?
Yeah, it's so interesting because one, you saw all the things that you just mentioned, and we've seen it really for a few games now. And I've mentioned, I think he's a clear upgrade from Christian Kirksey, Kamal Martin a season ago. Clearly the top linebacker on this team right now. But I really liked Devondre Campbell coming out of college. I loved the idea of Devondre Campbell. You go back and you watch him in Atlanta and Arizona, and you see all the enticing everything, the traits and all those sort of things, but the play always left something to be desired. There was always some inconsistencies. He was struggled to get off of blockers. He's big, he's physical, he's tall, he's fast, he has everything you want. It just never translated to tape. And the odds, like it would sort of in a way be like all of a sudden Kevin King just clicking in year 6 or year 5. Like usually those things just don't happen. If you're going to figure it out, you're going to figure it out at year 3, year 4, something like that. But he's been in the league a while now. It never clicked. He's had opportunities with different teams, again, Atlanta and Arizona. It didn't really click with either side. Both teams were fine with letting him go when his contract was up. He comes to Green Bay, and again, I'm super excited about all of those traits and all the things that he's shown on tape throughout his career. But I assumed, I think sort of naturally, that this was going to be another thing where those same inconsistencies were going to show up. He might struggle to get off of blocks, maybe struggle in coverage. But no, not at all. He's been an incredibly pleasant surprise. He's been active in the pass game. Even when he's allowed completions, he's making the tackle immediately. As you mentioned, some of that sideline to sideline speed. He's held up well at the point of attack. I think the only thing that's really been missing from his game so far in these first 3 games has been his blitzing ability. He hasn't shown the ability to really get home on some of those blitzes. So certainly still something that he could maybe work on there. But overall, a heck of a revelation for a guy that came in, midway through, what was it, mini camps or OTAs or camp? I forget which one it was, but later in the process, and was really had at a fairly reasonable price considering Christian Kirksey got gobbled up right away for a solid price. So great signing so far by Brian Gutekunst.
It's always fascinating to see when things click in a player's journey, and sometimes that is why an NFL journey can be so short, because players don't find that right sort of fit. But I mean, the Packers have revitalized guys' careers, Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith, who it's not like they weren't successful before by Devondre Campbell's means, but you see these new chapters of dominance. And sometimes it just takes that few years for players to find those coaches and those systems that they work with. Another guy, obviously, to highlight, Kenny Clark. I mean, he was just where he needed to be this game. Great quarterback hits and pressure. Movement off the line, I think, was the best I've seen this season out of him.
Yeah, I think, this is why we kind of do these episodes, is because we always have our initial reactions right after the game. But when we get to go through and watch the tape in greater detail, certain players, and make no mistake about it, Kenny Clark popped to the naked eye. Like, you didn't have to go back and watch the film to know that Kenny Clark was great in this game, but you get even more of an appreciation for the things that he was able to do. The pressure late in the game that led to a fumble. I mean, he bench pressed Alex Mack early in the game to get into the backfield, and it's just a consistent presence. And as I talked about earlier this week, when Kenny Clark is going well, this defense is generally going well. And Zach Cruz mentioned that, and Nagler and I have talked about that in the past as well. When Clark struggles, this defense tends to struggle. He is literally the centerpiece that everything else revolves around. If he's clogging the center of that defense, that makes things easier on the edge rushers. If he's clogging things in the center, that makes things easier on the Devondre Campbells of the world. If he's getting pressure on the interior, that makes things easier on the corners and the safeties. Like everything revolves around him. And when he plays like that, the defense can really click. And I think we saw a good deal of that. But, it was interesting. Clark last year, he got hurt early in the season. He really struggled. And there was even an interview, I forget, in one of the games, where the announcer was talking and saying, Kenny Clark's been frustrated. He hasn't had the same impact. He finally got healthy. End of last year, he looked like dominant Kenny Clark, and he's really come out of the gate and looked great this season already.
I think he's also come up to be a great persona face of this defense. I mean, you see him on the Packers fence here in Green Bay. He's definitely, fans are flocking as he keeps growing as well. They see the impact he has on the field. And schematically talking, it really looks like when you look at this film again, Savage and Alexander were operating as a tandem. They almost went everywhere together in coverage. Alexander, 3 passes deflected, interception, 4 solo tackles. I mean, this was a really, really aggressive showing from him.
Yeah, Alexander, I thought Darnell Savage was aggressive. Actually, I just want to talk about the defensive backs almost as a whole, because I know there were some pass interference penalties, good, bad, ugly, whatever you want to, make of it what you will. I can't remember a game where I saw this many contested passes in a game from a Packers defense. And some of those were completed. Deebo Samuel had a very tough contested catch against Jair Alexander. There were a couple other plays where, Kittle or Ayuk, I think, held on at the point of attack. But you go back and you watch this, and my hope is to put a video together at some point this week if I get the time to do it. You see time after time after time after time, contested play. And again, I don't remember the last time I saw that from the Packers defense. And, Sullivan had one early in the game. Savage had one where he came crashing down. Of course, the Alexander pick, it was all game long. Stokes had one later in the game. And again, even on the completions, there were very few plays where 49ers receivers had easy separation. And that always starts with Jair Alexander. But I thought the defensive backfield as a whole was as impressive as they've been in a while. And
I think you bring up a good point with some of those flags. Was it perhaps personally frustrating for Stokes to get called out on those? Sure. But I do think he's showing growth as well with his aggression and speed on the field, and that he has the confidence to make those plays, even if the refs are looking out for him. I still think as a rookie, it is important to put that type of performance out there, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, 1,000,000%. And I think, one, I think you can learn from those things. And I think sometimes making a mistake, whether it was a call or not, I think is something that you just have to kind of go through as an NFL corner. But you also want a short memory. And I thought even in those plays where, he, whether he was over aggressive or not, he came back late in the game, had a pass breakup, and it didn't phase him. He just kept kind of playing through it. And some of those plays like that's the cost of doing business as a corner in today's NFL. You're going to get flagged for a couple. We saw the San Francisco 49ers get flagged for some as well. You go to the next down, and you can live with that. And I think we even saw a Tampa Bay team a season ago. Go back to that NFC Championship game and watch that. Those corners were physical, they were tough, they were aggressive, and they were going to make the referees, make those calls. They didn't in the NFC Championship. They often don't get called in playoff scenarios like that. This is the way to play defense. Sometimes you're going to get a couple calls that go against you. I'm more than willing. I would rather have contested plays that maybe a flag gets thrown once in a while than these, 15 yards back, underneath passes for days that there's no contesting on it. I think this is the right way to go about it. I've really liked what I've seen from Joe Barry these last couple of weeks.
For sure. And with that accolade, let's switch to the offensive side of the ball. We had Yosh Neiman starting for once on the offensive line, 100% of offensive snaps, 22% of special team snaps. Let's break down this one for him.
Yeah, I thought this was a really nice performance. Now, started a little bit nervous. Like you could just tell it took him some time to get his feet underneath him. There were a few negative plays right off the bat. I was so impressed with his footwork and his technique for an undrafted player. I know he's it's funny. We always talk about boy, it would be nice to have a quarterback who could sit and learn for a couple of years and, then get out there on the field and have his mechanics down and things like that. We really talk about it for any other position. But Yosh is a player who had every single trait that you could possibly want for a tackle, but his technique and everything else was just a complete mess coming out. He wasn't ready, but they basically gave him 2 redshirt seasons to sit and learn and watch the David Bakhtiaris and the Elton Jenkins and everyone else. And apparently he took that to heart, and he learned those skills because his footwork and his athleticism and all of that stood out. Now, was it perfect? No, it wasn't. And there were definitely some hiccups along the way. But going against Nick Bosa and doing what he was able to do, and I know some of the scheme and the game plan and the chips and those things helped him out from time to time. But there were plays that he was not helped, and there were plays where he was one-on-one with Nick Bosa. There was plays where he was just one-on-one against other 49ers defenders, and I was impressed overall. And I'm not willing to say that he's ready to be a long-term starter at this point, but even if he's ready to be a swing tackle that can come in and at a moment's notice and provide that sort of depth, that has so much value. And I was very, very impressed by the way he played in this game.
It's a good testament to how the Packers have invested in him, to know that he can be that replacement when they needed him. Yep. That next man up mentality, they have prepared him for those moments. Otherwise, on the offensive line, I do think the run blocking still stands out as an issue. Their job isn't just to protect Aaron Rodgers. You look at Aaron Jones, he had 19 carries for 82 yards, only averaging 4.3. Ideally, with Jones as your number one running back, wouldn't you be looking for him to do more?
I think the average is okay. I'm fine with that. I think the bigger issues, we haven't seen those explosive runs. And I think one of the more difficult things about running the football is it's generally one of those things where it literally takes all 11 or at least all 5 guys working in unison along your offensive line with a blocking tight end or a fullback, those sort of things. It takes everyone working together. And what I love about Matt LaFleur is he has that best 5 guys mentality, and he's willing to move people around, and he's willing to put new guys in new spots. And I think that works. And I think Adam Stenavich has done a tremendous job. However, in a zone blocking scheme, it really is paramount to have everyone working in tandem, have the same rhythm, be comfortable with the guy next to you. And as a running back too, you have to remember, like as Yosh Nijman and, John Runyon Jr. and Newman and Myers, and those guys are making some of their first starts. For a long time, he's running behind Corey Linsley, Elton Jenkins, David Bakhtiari, Billy Turner, some guys that he's had, Lucas Patrick, a good amount of familiarity with for some time now. He knows when they're going to zig, he knows when they're going to zag, and he knows how to sort of cut off of that. He's still learning the nuances of running behind all of these guys, what they're going to do in specific scenarios. When are they going to detach from the combo block to go up and get the linebacker? When they go get that linebacker, are they going to, shade to the left? Are they going to shade to the right? I think all those nuances are still a work in progress. And as you have to bring in a Yosh Nijman or, all of these different things, that kind of messes with that as well. And at some point, Bakhtiari come back and Jenkins will move, and you have all these moving parts. And I think that's sort of affecting the run game. And I also just think, Royce Newman's not going to be a people mover. And I think right now, Yosh isn't going to be a people mover. And you've got Turner and you've got a couple other players, Jenkins, who can move some people when needed. But right now, this is more of a finesse offensive line. And it's going to be, really up to this offense to use all that motion and eye candy to get players out of their spots. So Green Bay's offensive line can be more sealers than movers, because I just don't think that they necessarily have the movers right now. So I'm confident in this offensive line as a whole, but as time goes on, you want to start seeing Aaron Jones and these running backs start springing more 10, 15, 20, 25-yard runs like we saw in the past couple of seasons.
And when the offensive line doesn't people move, you've got Alan Lazard that's just going to step up and really push Nick Bosa out of the way for that Jones touchdown. I mean, what a move for Lazard to pull that strength on Nick Bosa. We know Tunyon can do it, but I was impressed to see that from Lazard.
One of the most underrated aspects of this team and of this Matt LaFleur offense is just the dirty work that all of these players are doing. And Alan Lazard and Mercedes Lewis are kind of the poster boys for it, but it's Randall Cobb, it is MVS, it is EQ, it is Malik Taylor, it is Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon. All of these guys are unafraid to do dirty work. Devontae Adams is probably the only one where it's very rare that you see him get too messy as a run blocker, but outside of him, everyone else is grinding and trying to work to make everyone else successful on this offense. And that is a huge piece of why this Matt LaFleur offense works so well. And again, Alan Lazard, Mercedes Lewis, Tunyon, like those guys have just been unbelievable in their ability to block downfield. And that was just another great example of that.
Absolutely. So further downfield, late in the fourth, you could see MVS limping with what turns out to be a hamstring injury. He was supposed to get that scan today. How do you think that could impact the receiver room that was deep, but MVS has definitely gotten his fair share of confidence and catches from Rodgers.
Yeah, I think the big thing is just that deep threat, right? So, they have a variety of different receivers who are capable of playing a ton of snaps. And I don't think there's an issue there. I do think you have to wonder who's going to be that guy that's stretching the defense, and does that affect everyone else? Because when you have that guy that's willing to stretch the defense and a safety has to kind of shade over the top from time to time, it just opens things underneath for Devontae, for Alan Lazard, for Robert Tonyan, for Aaron Jones, for all those guys. And it makes their jobs, frankly, easier. So if MVS misses time, which we don't know 1,000,000% that that's going to be the case yet, we'll see as the week goes on if he practices or what his injury status is. But if he does miss time, it will be worth noting to see who takes his place. I would expect we'll see more Lazard and Cobb. That's a different style of wide receiver, obviously, than MVS. But it's still, we saw Alan Lazard win deep on that very first, series where he gets 35, 40-yard completion, whatever it was. So we saw Alan Lazard against New Orleans a season ago. And we've seen Lazard multiple times hit on some deep throws, and Adams can hit on deep throws. So I don't think it's a major cause for concern, but I think it does change up this offense a little bit if and when he, isn't able to go.
You're right, because the performances we saw out of Cobb at camp versus regular season, he hasn't been used or targeted as much, especially not deep like that successfully. So we know Tonyan can do it. DeGuara was targeted and caught at least once on Sunday, but you're right, that deep threat is a glaring hole at that point. If we're looking ahead to Steelers Packers, how important do you think it is to build off the momentum right now? Because you've got a scary November coming up that starts at Arrowhead.
I think absolutely. I think it's always important to get these wins and start building some momentum. Obviously you want to be playing your best football at the end of the year, but as soon as you can kind of get that momentum going, and especially coming off a big win in San Francisco, the worst thing is you get that big win on the road, you take a big step forward. And then if you come against a Steelers team that's really struggling back at home, and then you lose that, it's like you lost everything that you just gained from that last game. So I think it is important to kind of start stringing together these wins and sort of building that confidence. The Steelers are playing really bad football right now. Their offensive line is a mess. Their pass rush is a mess. We'll see if TJ Watt's able to go this week, but just being able to kind of string together those wins and gain that and really maintain that momentum. I think a lot of people have a lot more respect for Green Bay following that week 3 win than I think maybe some had going into it. And I think, you want to continue to have that, and you want to be able to say, down the road, it's always interesting to me. I actually think that if you like the Green Bay Packers, when you're up 5-1, 6-1, 7-1 team, I think that does give you a real mental advantage going into a game where teams are questioning, are we going to be able to beat this Green Bay team with Aaron Rodgers? I think there's a piece that goes into that. I remember a Carolina Panthers game a while back where I was Cam Newton at quarterback, and the Panthers outplayed the Packers all game long. There's been a couple scenarios where this, but the Packers just kind of did enough. And you could just feel like that Panthers team was before they were starting to kind of make their run towards a Super Bowl appearance at the time. But you could just see that Carolina outplayed them all game, but the Green Bay had the mental advantage. They were the better team for so long. And you could just see Carolina kind of getting tight at the end and wondering, are we going to be able to put this team away? And I think that psychological advantage goes a long way. So I'd love to see Green Bay string together some wins early here.
You're right. And it starts now, if they want that mental fortitude to be able to go to Arrowhead, host the Rams, host the Seahawks, it starts now, hosting the Steelers, visiting the Bengals, visiting the Bears, hosting Washington. You have to string along these wins. So further in the season, you can be that 6-1, 7-1 team. Absolutely. What are your final thoughts about this heading into, the TJ Watt game? Is this going to be a game where they prove that they made the right draft pick?
I don't think anything's going to prove that they made the right draft pick. Like Kevin King could have 7 interceptions in this game, return them all for touchdowns. And I still think, I don't think they're going to overcome that. But I'm excited for this game. I do want to ask you, so not Steelers Packers related, but we're 3 games in. We're not, we're still not even a fifth of the way through the season, basically like a sixth of the way. So we've got a long way to go, but we've had, some interesting tape, now through 3 weeks, insanely disappointing game against the Saints, really Jekyll and Hyde game where the first half was against Detroit, but the second half was fantastic. And then a great game, almost through and through against San Francisco with a couple blips in the radar here and there. What are you most surprised and excited about that maybe you didn't expect to be coming into this season?
Sunday definitely surprised me. I couldn't have predicted that outcome even if I had a magic ball in front of me. Honestly, I do still think from a personality perspective, but what this team is putting on the field and how they've done these last 3 weeks is not what they portrayed in camp and leading up to that. I do think they're struggling with somewhat of an identity. Maybe they know each other in the locker room, but on the field, that game brand is not there. It has not meshed together as well as they like to put it out in their camp controlled performances. And I do think that's a problem. I do think secretly that can be a shot to the confidence. And, I think maybe finally they're back on track. Maybe now they are where they thought they would be week one. Otherwise, surprisingly, again, some of that Joe Barry scheme, I didn't think it would take this long for it to click, but I am also surprised pleasantly with how well Chris Barnes is doing in this type of heightened leadership role. I think it's great to see him rewarded with those opportunities. The green dot really does mean so much for guys, both on the field performance wise and that mental fortitude. You can't underestimate how mentally invested in all aspects of the game these players are. So it's that part's exciting to me as well. I predicted this would be a breakout year for Darnell Savage, and it's pleasing to see him continue to grow. It seems to be something that he builds on week after week after week. And, I think finally this week we saw a little bit of the crack in the perfection of Josh Myers. But again, he's strong. He's tough. Both Rodgers and Lindsley have prepared him for this moment. So I think it's going to take week 4 to then look ahead and see, okay, is he building off of that? I just think there's so many pieces that we thought we knew at camp as media members, as fans, as whatever was being put out there. And we're no longer in the Petri dish of camp. We are now approaching week 4, and a lot of things have not gone as anybody in the NFL world could have anticipated. So it's fun to be along for the ride and look at it from an outsider, sometimes inside the walls. But this definitely was not how I could have expected this Packers season to be so far.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I think one of my pleasant surprises has really been Eric Stokes so far. I know he's a first round pick. I know, I know there's a lot of hype always when you do select somebody in the first round, but there were definitely some question marks of his on tape coming out of college, and nothing's perfect yet. I'm not crowning him as the next great corner, but I've been very pleasantly surprised with what he's able to do. And like I said, he's the second best corner in Green Bay right now. I don't have any question about that whatsoever. So I think that's really been a pleasant surprise. And, you mentioned Chris Barnes. He made a play on George Kittle. I think it was like a little end around to Kittle, where most Green Bay linebackers through the last 10 plus seasons aren't getting sideline to sideline to make that play on George Kittle. And I thought Chris Barnes, you can tell he's a little bit quicker this year, just in reading and diagnosing, but also you can just tell he's a little bit more fleet-footed as well. I think that's paid dividends. You could also see when he went out of that game, I thought Green Bay's defense took a little bit of a dip, and I think that there's a correlation between those two as well. So I'm excited to see how this team continues to grow. I think overall there have been some surprises along the way, but I think hopefully Green Bay's best football is still ahead of them.
He also lost 10 pounds, he said. So I would like to know the diet. How can I get to hook up with the Packers chef? I mean, losing 10 pounds is no easy feat, but if you could see how much it translated to that sort of quickness.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I can imagine that's going to help the old 40 time if you're dropping, 10 pounds. So no, he's been a very pleasant surprise as well. I'm excited. Hopefully he gets back from the concussion this week and is ready to go.
Yeah, concussion protocol is no joke. And it is nice to see, teams actually putting guys through it, doing those tests, because again, I think back in the old days, you saw way too many players get sent back out there with God knows what sort of brain damage. We all thought Devontae Adams could have been concussed, but it looked like, he just got the wind knocked out of him, which is also a very scary experience in midair under triple coverage.
Yeah, no, I don't ever want to experience that. Like, I probably would have died from that hit. So when he comes in the press conference and says, I'm different. Yeah, you're different, because that is not anything I ever want to experience in my lifetime, much less to get up from it, walk away from it, and then play 2 plays later and look like you didn't miss a beat. Like, yeah, that's just slightly different.
Anytime any of you think you can play NFL football, no, you can't.
No, I mean, there's a play in this game where like Aaron Jones like slithers through a hole and like just kind of falls forward a little bit, and dude, like the linebacker safety comes up and just drills him, and like I'm just like my whole body just aches just watching it, and I'm like, he just gets right back up, like, yeah, no big deal, like we're fine. I know he had some bumps and bruises from this game. It looked like he maybe took a little bit more time off through the second and third quarter than what's even normal for him, but I mean, man, what these players' bodies go through and how they're able to recover and get through, and it is astounding. It is absolutely astounding. And yes, Devontae, you are different, and kudos to you. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, 1'7", 33, they've all got superior muscle, everything, endurance, fortitude. And also this makes you realize, when you want to make fun of a way linemen's helmets look for just looking ugly or having all those protection, like look at how much pressure they go up against, literal pounds of pressure. It's just like, I don't care how ugly that helmet looks. It is saving your brain when you are colliding with guys like that on the opposite side.
It's insane. It is absolutely insane. Speaking of insane, Rachel, you were insane for doing this and missing the Bachelor for this. Like, I don't know how, like, there's no way I can repay you for that. But I appreciate you as always. Hopefully we'll be able to do this again next week. I can't wait to do it, but yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Happy to be here. Happy Pack a Day.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Rachel, where can we follow you on Twitter?
At Rachel Hopmayer.
Easy enough to remember. You can follow me at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all new episode with Ty Dunn. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.